Hello and welcome to today's live stream. It is 2 p.m. on a Sunday yet again, and here we are. Today is an English lesson. So, what we're going to be looking at today is part 2 to my first lesson, part 1 of how to compare texts, and specifically non-fiction texts. So, we're going to be looking at a different style of comparison question today. Okay, so welcome to everybody on YouTube. Thank you for joining me. Please like, comment and subscribe, and consider joining the Patreon. There is a link in the description below. On the Patreon, you'll be able to access this full lesson as a recording now, as it's currently live on Patreon. And that means that when we go through how to answer this particular question today, only for the Patreon viewers, I'm going to be doing a complete essay exam model answer so that you'll be able to see exactly how to access those marks for this type of question. If you're just watching on YouTube, I'm going to be going over basically all of the theory, explaining to you how to answer it, but I'm not actually going to show you how to answer it. So that's the extra that you get for signing up to the Patreon. Also on Patreon, you will be getting the worksheet that we'll be going through on the screen, so you can print that and have that in front of you, have your own copy. So it's always useful to be able to download these worksheets, so then you have some resources as well. Everybody on Patreon, thank you so much for joining me. Your support is really appreciated, and if you continue to support, I can continue to deliver revision sessions and lessons like this, which hopefully will help you achieve what you need to achieve for your GCSEs. Okay, so let's have a look at what we're going to be doing today. I'm just going to run through how this is going to work. I have two texts today. I have a text from 2025 and I have a text from 1842. Now there's a reason for that, in that the paper 2 for the language paper, you will be given two texts from different time periods. So you will have a text from either the 20th or the 21st century, which will be a more modern text, which is the example we have on the screen here, and you will also have a 19th century text, so from the 1800s. Now, the reason for this is that part of what the exam is testing you on is your ability to understand language that has a slightly different syntax to what you're used to. And just by its very nature, because language changes all the time, much older texts do have a different way of articulating themselves. So it's an extra challenge to be able to understand and interpret those texts. Okay, so what we're going to be doing is reading through each of these texts. And once we've done that, we're going to be filling out these tables here. Now, it's important to note before I explain that this particular question we're going to be working on today is a question about comparing writers' viewpoints. So the part 1 video, where we have compared texts before, was comparing an element within the texts in how they're presented. So I think we were looking at music technology specifically. Today we're actually going to be looking at technology in a more wider context. So we were thinking about how was technology presented in one text compared to the other, and we were quoting but essentially summarising. So for all intents and purposes, it was actually quite a simple question because we didn't have to do any analysis. For this question, what we're actually comparing is the writer's viewpoint, which isn't dissimilar to what we were doing before, but we need to be really explicit about the fact that we are talking about the writer's viewpoint, so always referencing that. Within those comparisons between the points of view of both writers, we also need to be analysing. So what does analysis mean? We've done language analysis before, we've done structure analysis. It's anything where we are identifying methods that the writer is using and discussing the effect of those methods. So for this particular type of question, we can be talking about language or structure. I think naturally most people talk about language more often because it's something we do in school. I think more often it's what we're most used to, and structure can feel a little bit more vague, but either is absolutely fine within this question. We ideally want to be talking about both at some point in the answer, but there's no hard and fast rule for that. So what we're going to be doing is reading through both texts and discussing their viewpoints. But what we also need to make sure of is that we are able to compare the viewpoints directly. So, for example, if the first person said that technology was great, a comparison to that wouldn't be that technology is new, because those two things don't equate to either a complete opposite or a similarity. So the comparisons you make need to be either a similarity, or a difference where they are actually opposite and they're about the same thing, but they're opposite. So if one says it's great, the other one might say it's awful. That's a direct comparison. What you do need to make sure of, though, is that the question that you're actually answering, you need to make sure that you know whether it is specifying differences or similarities. Now, different exam boards tend to lean differently on this. Some will just always see similarities and differences, and that's okay. But some stick to differences mostly, but they tend to occasionally, depending on the texts, say similarities. You need to make sure you actually read the question to see what you're being asked for that particular question. The one we're going to be looking at today is... it just says comparison. I've tried to keep it as vague as possible, so I haven't specified differences or similarities. So we can do either today, but do bear in mind that sometimes it will specify difference. And in fact, the bullet point here, I've got different perspectives, but we're not going to worry about that too much today. We just need to make sure that our comparisons are actually comparisons and not just two random points. Okay, so we're going to be looking at each, reading each, and then we're going to be filling out these tables. Note that they are analysis tables because I have a technique column and an effect column. And then I'm going to go over how you might answer the whole question. There is another mysterious page underneath there, but that's only for the Patreon viewers. So I will show that to everyone on Patreon once this section of the YouTube video has ended. And on there, I have basically a breakdown of exactly how to answer each of the comparison analysis paragraphs. Again, if you're only watching on YouTube, do go to the link below to join the Patreon and you'll be able to access that as well. Okay, so let's get started. We'll start with the first text. So this is the more modern text. I'd probably advise doing that in your exam. You will have answered a few questions before this one anyway, but start with the thing that's most familiar to you to kind of warm up, and then we'll look at the text that might be a little bit harder to understand. So essentially what I'm going to do is I'm going to read through it with the text on the screen, and then I'm going to give you a few minutes pause where I step back, and I just want you to consider what is the viewpoint of this particular writer in terms of technology. What do they think about technology? Okay, so be thinking about that as I read. I'm going to give you a few minutes then to write some notes about that. So make sure you've got a pen and pad with you, or some paper, or on your computer, anything to take some notes on, and then we will feed back and begin to fill out that table. Okay, so what I might do is just make this ever so slightly bigger, so that everybody can read it on their screen. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so this piece is called The Triumph of Technology by Alexander Hayes, Tech Enthusiast 2025. So the fact that he's a tech enthusiast, we might assume that he's going to like tech, but we want to make our interpretations of his opinion a bit more sophisticated than that. So we don't just want to be saying that he likes it. We need to maybe find some more nuance within the text itself. Okay. The rapid advancement of technology is nothing short of extraordinary. Every day, innovations bring efficiency, creativity, and human connection to levels never before imagined. Artificial intelligence streamlines processes, freeing us from mundane tasks so we can focus on meaningful pursuits. Medical breakthroughs powered by cutting-edge computing save lives, while digital platforms allow voices to be heard across the world. We stand at the threshold of an era where machines amplify human potential, enabling us to solve problems once thought insurmountable. Consider how communication has evolved. In mere seconds, I can converse with someone on the other side of the planet, sharing ideas, exchanging knowledge, and fostering global collaboration. The physical barriers that once constrained progress are obsolete. Technology has democratized information, granting access to education, opportunities, and connectivity like never before. Skeptics fear change, but history proves that progress is unstoppable. It is not technology that threatens humanity, but our unwillingness to embrace its potential. Those who lament the loss of traditional ways fail to see the bigger picture. Just as steam power revolutionized industry, artificial intelligence and automation refined and expand human capability. We are not being replaced, we are being enhanced. To reject progress is to remain stagnant, clinging to outdated fears rather than stepping boldly into a future of endless possibility. Okay, so there you go. I will discuss that in a moment. I'm going to leave you now just to have a little think about what you think this writer thinks. Obviously they like it, but I want you to try and be more specific than that. So just a couple of sentences on your notepad. This writer thinks blank. Okay, so what do they think about technology? So just a few minutes and then we will feed back. Okay, great. For anyone who's not watched any of these videos before, sometimes I do that just to give you a minute. If you'd rather take more time, then pause it. Pause the video if you're watching a recording. If you don't need that much time, just fast forward it. Okay, so utilize the fact that this is a recording, unless you're watching it live. In that case, thank you, and just bear with me on that. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a couple of the things that I noticed. So you might have noticed the same things. If you haven't, it doesn't necessarily mean what you thought is wrong. You just need to be able to check that you can find evidence for that. And of course, if you want to check something, pop it in the chat and I can have a look at it and see if I agree with you or not. But the key thing that I'm going to show you is 2 opinions I found in there and then where I see it. So you need to be able to back up your ideas about this writer's viewpoint with evidence from the text. So where are they saying that particular opinion? Okay, right. So the 2 opinions that I've come up with are, 1, they believe that technology enhances human endeavour, human capability. So rather than it impeding on what humans can do, it's actually making it easier for humans to be able to do great things. And then the second point is that they're saying, the writer believes that technology has a levelling effect in society where actually it puts everyone on an equal playing field. Okay, so those are my 2 opinions that I'm going with, and I'm just going to show you where I see that. There's quite a few examples actually for each that I could choose. So for the technology enhances human capabilities, let me just grab my highlighter. Okay, so I'm just going to see exactly where I saw that now. Here we go. This is the first time I see it. There are other moments. So artificial intelligence streamlines processes, freeing us from mundane tasks so we can focus on meaningful pursuits. So what that does is it kind of it puts to bed any opinion that actually artificial intelligence could take over. It's saying actually artificial intelligence is great because we can make it do the stuff that we don't want to do, all the boring stuff, and then we can do things that are more meaningful and more important. Okay, there are a couple of examples, other examples I could have chosen to back that up. Here we go. We stand at the threshold of an era where machines amplify human potential, enabling us to solve problems once thought insurmountable. So I could highlight that as well. I don't want to get into the habit of using too many quotes in my actual answer, so I'll probably stick to 1 quote per opinion. But it's good to see that you've got options. Okay, good. And then my other point was it has a leveling effect on society. So that's where it's talking in that second paragraph. It says about the communication, and then it's saying the physical barriers that once constrained progress are obsolete. Technology has democratized information. That's the key bit there. Granting access to education, opportunities, and connectivity like never before. So what it's saying is that people who were perhaps in an economic or social situation in previous decades, they might not have had the same access to education or information as they do now because of the widespread of the internet. So it's actually saying that what it's doing is breaking down barriers perhaps between classes or between privilege and non-privilege. Okay, so there's my evidence. Okay, so what I'm going to do then is I am going to use that information to fill out my table. We'll go over that in a minute, this second one. So this is my table for Alex. Technology enhances human achievement or endeavor. Endeavor as well. Okay, now my quote is I think I'm going to choose the first one. Artificial intelligence streamlines processes. Quote, artificial intelligence. Okay, now technique. Let's have a think about this technique. Freeing us from mundane tasks so we can focus on meaningful pursuits. I think it might be the use of the adjectives there. Interestingly, the adjectives have the same letter, so it's a form of alliteration here. So I'm going to call them alliterative adjectives. We've got mundane and meaningful, and it's supposed to show a contrast there or juxtaposition. So we have alliterative adjectives, juxtaposition as well. So this is essentially the annotation stage of your writing. You wouldn't necessarily have a table like this, although you might make notes as a plan at the beginning of your, just before you actually write the essay. But it's always important to write your notes in annotation form so that you can go back to them. And then the effect, so as I said before, so shows contrast between what is possible with tech and not, etc. So what's possible with and what's possible not. I know you can't read that, I'm terribly sorry, but you can hear what I'm saying, so you get the gist, and it should be on my captions as well. Okay, so the second thing was the fact that it's a leveler, right? So it makes everyone in a more equal situation, which was this one here. I'll go up to opportunities, I think. So the point was that technology breaks down inequality. The quote was, technology has democratized information, granting access to education. I'm going to say here that because of the granting access, that's personification, because it's making the technology sound like it's choosing to do that, right? Which then makes the technology sound helpful. Helpful with our best interests at heart. Okay, great. Okay, brilliant. Right, so that's the first one done. So I'm going to just give you a second to copy as much down as that as you can actually see. You might have slightly different points to me, which is absolutely fine. But I'd like you to fill out a version of a table like that in your books. If you're watching on Patreon, you should have this actual worksheet with you, so you'll be able to just fill this out as is. Everyone else might need to use a ruler to create that table. So just fill out that table as best you can. I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to do that, and then we shall look at the second source. Okay, right, so let's have a little look then. So, we are looking at the second source now, which is the 1842 source. So again, just bear in mind the language might be a little bit more baffling. Just the phraseology over time changes in all languages, so the phrasing is just a little bit different. I would advise, as part of revision for this type of exam, to be reading texts from this time period quite regularly, because the more you read texts of a similar type, the more you get used to the way it's written, and then it just becomes less alien to you. Okay, so this one's called A Dire Warning on the March of Machines. So already we can tell from the title that perhaps this is quite a different point of view. Okay, we get the sense that this writer isn't viewing machines in quite the same way. Okay, so it's by Edmund Whittaker, Industrial Gentleman, 1842. Right. The ceaseless march of mechanisation is upon us, and I dare say it shall be the ruin of our society. We stand at the precipice of an era in which the unfeeling clatter of gears and pistons shall replace the diligent hands of honest men. Factories swell with monstrous contraptions, churning out goods with neither care nor craftsmanship, casting aside skilled workers who once laboured with pride. What shall become of the weavers, the blacksmiths, the artisans, whose very livelihoods are now threatened? Shall they wander in destitution, discarded like worn-out tools? These infernal machines, hailed as marvels of efficiency, strip away the dignity of labour. No longer does the apprentice learn his trade by the fireside, nor does the craftsman hone his skill with patience and precision. Instead, men are reduced to mere operators, standing idly as lifeless engines dictate the rhythm of their toil. Progress, they call it, but I see only calamity, a future where man is but a servant to the machines he has created, where wealth pools in the hands of factory masters, whilst the common worker toils in despair. What shall be left of society when human labour is deemed obsolete, when machines govern industry and commerce? What role shall remain for the labouring class? Let those who extol the virtues of progress beware. Technology, untamed and unrestrained, shall bring forth a world where man is made secondary, where his skills and traditions are swept away in the tide of mechanical ambition. Mark my words, what begins as convenience shall end in catastrophe. Okay, right, so similarly, I'm going to give you a few minutes now just to have a go at writing a couple of notes of what you think this writer thinks. But the extra challenge here is that I would like the points of view that you find for this particular writer to be able to link to the points of view of the first writer that we have chosen. So you might have chosen slightly different ones. This is probably where it would be good advice actually to read them both first before you attempt this. So that you know overall what each writer says. But we're going to try and find either a similarity or a difference, probably a difference, for each of these points here within this text, so that when we compare, the points we're making directly contrast with each other rather than being completely separate points. So I want you to come up with what this writer thinks in comparison to the first writer. Okay, so I'm just going to give you a few minutes to make a couple of notes on that. Okay, so let's have a think then. I've got in mind what I said for the first source, so I'm going to compare the opinions of this writer to the opinions of the first writer. So, whereas the first writer said that technology enhances human achievement, this writer is saying that technology will hinder human achievement because it will take over. Okay, so like for example, in that first sentence, the ceaseless march of mechanization is upon us. It shall ruin. It shall be the ruin of our society. Let's have a look. Factory solar. Here we go. Progress, they call it, but I see only calamity. Future where man is but a servant to the machines he has created. So this idea that actually it's going to stop human progress in place of machine progress. So just highlight this bit here for that point. And the second thing is that whereas the first source is saying that it's actually having a leveling effect and it's destroying prejudice or inequality, this man is saying that actually it will be to the detriment of people in the lower class. Like for example here, what role shall remain for the labouring class? So anyone working class will struggle. I believe there was something else up here though. There's something about right here. So wealth pools in the hands of factory masters while the common worker toils in despair. So that right next to each other actually. So that huge disparity in wealth will actually get bigger because people who don't need to work won't, and then people who do need to work will need to be operators for these machines. So the factories will end up earning more money for the factory masters because there'll be more output, but perhaps the people who are working in it aren't going to get anything from this. They're only going to get their skills replaced essentially. Okay, so let me just pop that in the table then. So point of view, firstly, is that technology will stop human progress. And then my quote for that is, progress they call it, I only see calamity, a future where man is but a servant to the machines he has created. This might take me a couple of minutes. And then the technique, I'm going to talk about this use of the exclamation, so the exclamation mark, and the dash, so the use of punctuation here. And the reason for that is because it adds effect and tone, right? So technique, the use of punctuation, specifically exclamation and dash. Now the effect of the exclamation is to show, because he's talking about progress here and the fact that people think it's progress. So it's to show disdain for opposing opinion. And the dash is to add drama to his statement. And what that does is it makes what he's saying sound more disastrous. Makes what he is saying sound catastrophic. Great, okay. So the second point was that actually he believes that will cause greater inequality. And the quote for that was, wealth pools in the hands of factory masters while the common worker toils in despair. Notice my technique here is structural when I'm talking about punctuation. I'm now probably going to talk about language now for my next one. Okay, so wealth Okay, and then pools, I'm going to say that's a metaphor. So imagine something pooling and gaining what we call, it's kind of like slowly rising, right? Like water rises. So the wealth is rising like that. And yeah, we can talk about the metaphor. I probably also talk about this verb toils if I zoomed in, but I don't need to necessarily mention that here. And the effect of that is to, let's pause in the hands of the factory masters. It's to show that I guess we have no control over growing inequality. So if you think of like water's kind of got a mind of its own, isn't it? We can't control water. It's like, I guess it would be the natural thing for the wealth to pool there. Almost like it's inevitable. Water goes where it will go. I can explain that a little bit better when we actually write the response. Okay, so there we have it. So similarly, I'm just going to give you a minute now to write any notes down for that second source if you want to draw the table, and copy a couple of those notes if you can, or write your own. And then I will just briefly go over how you'd put those ideas into a response. I'll show you the structure before I end the YouTube video, and then everyone on Patreon will be able to see me do a full model response for this exam question. Okay. Okay, right, so lastly for the YouTube then, this page here just goes over the structure, overall structure of the response. So the question will be something like this. Both writers convey their viewpoints about technology. Compare how the two writers present their attitudes towards technology. Now again, some questions will be worded specifically like present their different attitudes, and some will say similar attitudes, so be mindful of that. Just so happens that here we've spoken about two different attitudes, and that's absolutely fine. In your answer, you should compare the different perspectives of the two writers, analyse how their attitudes are conveyed through their use of language and structure, support your response with references to both texts. Okay. So the response structure. First thing you want to do is a short introduction summarising the two different viewpoints identified. Now, nothing in there It is about analysis. You don't have to talk about any techniques. It is just, in your own words, summarising the differences in the viewpoints between the writers that you're going to go into more detail in later in the essay, but it's just to give it the response itself a better structure and to keep you focused as well, so you know what you're doing. And then you'd have 2 comparison paragraphs, but they're analysis comparison paragraphs, so they're really long paragraphs. You might even want to split them into maybe a couple of paragraphs each, but you don't want to almost speak about the text separately, so it's probably safer to do them as whole paragraphs. So the structure would be, you make a point about the first writer, so about what they think. You back that up with a quote. You give me a technique, you talk about the effect of that technique and link it to the point. Then, how does this compare to the second writer? So you specifically have a sentence halfway through this paragraph where you say, this viewpoint is different to the second writer because, and in that you're then making a point about the second writer. You then quote for the second writer, talk about a technique, the effect, and link back to the point you've made. Okay, and you repeat that. So you basically have 2 comparisons to make, which means you need 2 viewpoints, opposing or similar viewpoints from each writer. Okay. And then it's really important for question 4 to end it with a conclusion. This can literally be similar to the introduction, almost copy-paste, but you're just summarising your ideas again, just to close off the essay so it doesn't feel open-ended. Okay, right, so please feel free to have a go at that, using your notes to help you, based on those texts. But also perhaps find some examples online to practice with, using that structure there. So I'm going to end the YouTube video there, so thank you so much for joining me. Again, please like, comment and subscribe, and consider joining the Patreon in the link below, where you'll be able to see what we're about to do, which is to put all of those notes into an actual full response, worded in the way that you should do in the exam. Okay, so on my Patreon as well, there you have access to all of my previous lessons and worksheets that we've been doing weekly for quite a while now, and you'll have access to the worksheet for today that you can use. Okay, brilliant. So thank you so much for joining me, everyone, on YouTube. Next week we'll be looking at maths again, so we're going to be looking at powers, roots, surds essentially, so indices, laws, anything to do with powers and roots we're looking at next week. Okay, thank you very much.